Thank you so much.
Great to have you.
It's always really great to be back on the Google campuses and working in the teaching kitchen and working with my friends like Dee Dee Sampson and Laura Braley, and also new friends like Nick Madden here. And so what we're going to do is march through some really great recipes and ideas and techniques that I want you to keep in your back pocket. Essentially, it's fun because this is the Google Cloud campus, right? Or I saw a lot of cloud stuff. So, like, I want you to keep these ideas in the cloud of your mind, because I think that you know the thing about the name of the book, Vietnamese Food Any Day, is that I want to equip you with information and ideas that allow you to make Vietnamese food anytime you want. The book is not called Vietnamese Food Every Day. That's a lie. I do not eat Vietnamese food every day, but I want to be able to show you how you can make it anytime you want. So the deal with this book is that you can make great Vietnamese food from ingredients that are easily accessible within your fingertips at your regular grocery store, at farmers markets. You don't need to go to an Asian market unless you want to. But sometimes with busy lives, it's sort of a pain in the butt to negotiate the aisles and all the different kinds of brands and different labeling and everything, and even different languages. And so when my family came here in 1975, there was no fish sauce, no rice paper, no rice noodles in our American supermarkets. But now there is. So it allows me, and I've been waiting to write this book for a number of years, to make this food. And also, Vietnamese food is extremely popular in America these days for good reasons, because it is extremely easy to prepare. And so the first thing we're going to do, and I want you to keep this in your back pocket, is this pickle. I call it the Viet Any Day pickle, because this is the go-to pickle that you would use to make, say, Vietnamese banh mi sandwiches. I keep this stuff in my pantry because it can turn any dish into a Viet-ish dish, because it has the colors, the textures, and the flavors. You're going to be able to put it into a sandwich if you'd like. So what I'm going to do is, traditionally, it was made with a daikon and a carrot. If you like daikon radish, and when you're shopping at a farmer's market or a regular market, any kind of market forum, you want one that is approximately the average size and length of a woman's forearm, okay? And you want it kind of smooth and soft. And the reason being is that is the sign that the daikon has not struggled too much. So when you cut into it, it's not going to be bitter. You want a little bit of that funk. I know a lot of Vietnamese sandwich shops have this pickle made with carrot only, but it's just not as exciting. And if you can't get the daikon, because sometimes it can be difficult, you can use a watermelon radish like this one. And in the recipe in the book, you'll also see that I say you can use a regular radish if you want. And if for some reason you don't like the radish funk, then you can go ahead and use all carrots. But the carrot just isn't as exciting. You want that little kind of and heat that comes with radish. So go ahead and peel them, and you want a couple of them, and I'm just going to show you, the beauty of this radish is that it's a Chinese radish, and it has this beautiful coloration on the inside, and here at Google they have all this awesome produce, and this is the season. It's like a cold weather thing, so in the spring you're going to find these at your regular supermarkets and farmers markets. And the beauty of this particular radish is that it will turn the pickle into a fuchsia orange color. And it still has that funk. All right, so it's just some basic knife skills. When you're chopping anything that's kind of round, make sure you cut a cheek off so that you can keep it down, so that you can tell it who's boss. None of this I'm gonna, well, because people think that, manipulating food is you're letting the food manipulate you. No, you are manipulating the food. So you're cutting pieces that are roughly the size of an average chopstick. I don't use the word julienne. It's a French word. We're Americans. We know what matchsticks are, more or less. We know what the size of a bean sprout is. I grew up not knowing what terms like julienne were, and I did just fine. And so in a lot of Asian cooking, matchsticks are the term that you'll see. But unfortunately, nowadays, you don't see matchsticks very often. But you know, I use the term because I think that it allows you to imagine what something should look like and the size. So you're going to cut these pieces like so. And when you get to the carrot part, you want the carrot to be a little bit smaller than the radish. The reason being is that the carrot, you don't have as much of it. It's like a 1-to-2 ratio of carrot to radish. So, you know, you want something that is a little bit smaller so that the ingredients will go ahead and they will commingle nicely. And it's a textural, it's a color thing. That's what a lot of this food is about. And so once that you remember that, it allows you to really understand sort of like a mnemonic. Okay, if I get, you know, a 1-pound daikon, then I'm just gonna have, once I trim all that, I want a carrot that's a little bit small, like half that size visually. And then I'm gonna cut it smaller so that, you know, you'll get the combination of colors and textures that you want. So then the other thing that I do is you'll see in the recipe that I add a little bit of sugar and salt, and then I ask you to massage it. And the reason for massaging it is you want to take some of the moisture out of the vegetable. When you pickle, you want to remove some of that moisture so then it's sort of then a little sponge. And then you're gonna hit it with your brine. And once you hit it with your brine, then you're going to allow the vegetable to suck it up. When you eat a pickle and it's kind of like, it's just not picking up the flavor of the brine, it just tastes like a pickle that's been, a vegetable that's been marinated, then they haven't really removed the moisture from the vegetable. And that's why you'll see like traditional pickling recipes, you'll see that like cucumbers and other kind of, you know, you make like a cucumber pickle, or even kimchi, you're like throwing salt on it. And I use salt and sugar because sugar allows the vegetable to retain a certain level of crispness. So while I'm talking to you right now, this massaging thing has allowed the vegetables to get very wet. So they're kind of like weeping and like, you know, like releasing their natural liquids. And when I'm making a huge amount of the pickle, which I've done in previous engagements, I just let it sit there because I'm not going to massage like, say, 10 times this quantity. I'm just going to hit it with, you know, my ingredients, my salt and my sugar, and then I'm just going to walk away and then let nature, you know, I'm basically cooking while I'm sleeping or something like that, or texting or whatever else. And in the recipe, it'll say you can either massage this for 3 minutes or you can just let it sit for 20. And then once it gets to a certain point where it is, where you can take a piece of daikon or carrot and bend it. This is my little test for you. So a lot of my recipes, I'm going to show you little tiny cues, visual, tactile, flavor cues so that you know when you're done. Because once that you go into your kitchen and cook up any recipe, it will be completely different than the experience of the actual recipe tester or recipe writer experience. So I try to cram in as much information as possible so that you'll have a sense of how to be a good cook. And I also know that people change recipes too. I don't expect people to follow recipes. I don't always follow my own recipe, and my husband calls me on it. So, but you know, first time out, remember to, you know, follow a recipe and then see how you like it and then tweak it. So I just put a little water in here. So pretend that, you know, that you just are still at your sink, and then we'll just pour this through. You want to retain some of the flavor of the vegetables. And give it a little pressing. Depending on your strainer, you may have to just, you really want to like put as much of the water out of there as possible. This will seem like a strangely small quantity, but for the magic of television or YouTubing, we're just going to do a small quantity so that you get a sense of what's going to happen, because essentially, it's sort of like the difference between pants and shorts. You're just going to do it a little bit. It just takes a little bit more time to and fabric to create a pair of pants than a pair of shorts. Similarly, you're going to a small batch like this. You can imagine what it would be like if I were to do a full batch. And so with the brine, it's merely combining sugar, water, and distilled white vinegar. I don't use fancy vinegars because fancy vinegars like champagne vinegars are not what Vietnamese cooks use. And rice vinegar is a little pricey, and the flavor is not often as bright as distilled white. And so there's about like half a cup of sugar, and then here's the vinegar, and then here's the water. And sometimes you can combine all of these things and simply stir them together if your water is warm, and it'll just dilute everything. And if you're in a hurry, you can put it in a pan and then kind of bring it to a simmer just so that you're heating up the all of the ingredients to allow them to dilute. So when I use distilled vinegar, I use Heinz. And I'm not like plugging them, I'm not like, like being sponsored by them or anything, but it just has a really brighter and slightly more acidic flavor than other distilled vinegars. So when you are making this food at home, taste the brine is what you want to do. Taste anything that you haven't put like raw meat into. I mean, that's what I do when I'm formulating my recipes. I taste my marinades before I throw my raw ingredients in there. And we don't always tell people that in recipe writing or cookbook writing. I'm just like, just taste it. Because again, your ingredients are going to be a little bit different than mine. And when you are making this pickle in advance, you can, if you can keep it in the fridge for like a whole month. And then you can pull it out and drain it to make your dishes with. And so once that we get there, we just pour it over. Sometimes you may have extra pickling brine, and then you can use it for another batch. The result, and this was made, Dee Dee, how long was this made? Maybe like Monday? So you're seeing what has happened in, say, like, 18 hours. So the color has changed, and it will continue to become a rosier pink color, and it's very, very pretty. If you use a red radish, you don't have to peel the radish itself. You can just kind of slice it. You'll see my instructions in there, and it's like bright fuchsia. So you can like create like these gorgeous colors and textures and flavors for your food. So once that you have that and you can keep it in your fridge, it gets kind of funky over time. So when you open up the jar, it sometimes has a very kind of like, ooh, I'm daikon and I'm kind of stinky. Just open it up and walk away and let it release itself. Let it express itself, and then you can go ahead and then use it and drain it. I say these things because, like my recipe testers have kind of complained, oh God, can I eat that? Because what if it's gone bad? Don't worry about it. Just open it up. It's just a vegetable. Quick question on the daikon or on the radish. Do you need to peel them? Is that a personal preference? I like to peel them. I like to peel them because the skin is a different texture. Some people don't like to peel them, and that's fine by me. I've had recipe testers who's like, I don't want to peel it for no waste cooking issues, which is fine. If you decide to not peel, scrub. I use a really great, harsh vegetable brush because you want to, you want to get the crud out. And then also, I think, for me, it kind of scrapes the skin a little bit so it allows flavors to come in. And then after you got the pickle ready, that's awesome. And then I think we're going to have a little bit of time to, well, you know what, let's do this. Let's make the foundational Nuoc Cham dipping sauce. Because with that pickle and with the dipping sauce, you've got two things in your back pocket that allows you to make Vietnamese food. Like, turn anything Vietglish. So what we have going on there, and I know a lot of recipes that have been written in English tell you to just throw everything into a container, like, into a jar, and then just go to town with it and it's over. The problem with that is twofold. Number one, if any of you have ever made margaritas, and how many of you like to drink margaritas, you know that limes differ in terms of flavor. Sometimes they're extremely bitter. And so if I were to just tell you to go ahead and throw your lime juice and your sugar and water together and fish sauce and hope for the best, oh my goodness, and what if it tastes awful? I was kind of made to prepare sauces for my family since I was really young, and so I was always judged by 6 other people who were older, because I was the youngest in my family, right? So my mom's like, "Hey, there's the kid, just let her do the hard stuff." And she, there's no cooking involved, but there's stirring and your taste buds. So what I just did right now is I just leaned on the limes and gave it a little rub so that it's crushing the insides. The other thing that what you want to do when you're buying limes, and Dee Dee and her team is really great, buy ones that are smooth, have smooth skin, really like my husband's bald head, or Kojak. No, I mean, this is a positive thing, because if the limes have a really thick skin, it's going to be dry on the inside. So really, you want juicy ones, because guess what? It costs the same as one that is not so juicy. So you can use a citrus reamer, a wooden one. You can use a press, or you can also just grab a fork and go ahead and juice your limes in here. And what the beauty of using a fork or a citrus reamer, which is one of those wooden things that are pointy and have a lot of textures, is that you get pulp. And the pulp adds body to the sauce. If you're using a press, like what you would see a bartender using a lot of times, then you're going to get a little bit stronger of a flavor in the finish, because you're getting more juice and not as much pulp when you're measuring your ingredients. This is what happens when you're trying to squeeze lime into a small jar. Just don't do it. Because I thought I was trying to be, really cute here. You want to do it into because I was like, oh, Dee Dee set up this really beautiful jar for me. Do it into a little cup or a bowl. It's all right. It's all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Look at that. This is what happens. You're not cooking your home kitchen, but it's just food. I mess up so many times. And I'm always cooking in different kitchens. I'm cooking on different stoves. And so, and even when I've been to different parts of the country, I was in Minneapolis, where the limes are literally 2.5 times this size. And I went to the grocery store and I said, what is up with your limes? And because they were the size of small oranges. And they said, oh, well, this is all we get. We get them from wherever, and we choose the bigger ones. And I said, that totally screws up my visual, thing when I'm doing videos and stuff. And they're like, well, that's all we have. And I chose the smallest ones possible. But anyway, so here you've got your lime juice, and you're looking about 3 tablespoons there, 2-3 tablespoons, and then you're going to add your sugar. If you don't want to eat sugar, use maple syrup, which is what I have in the recipe. And it's a really, really nice way to avoid refined sugars. So I can use this, and I need about 1/2 cup of water. And what I'm doing first is I am creating a limeade. And when you're measuring liquids, make sure that you're measuring it so like there is this part that goes down like this. This is called the meniscus. That meniscus is where you want to measure. So it's not so important in this, but it is important when you are, say, making doughs and stuff. So the reason why I'm making a limeade first is this is where I'm going to test my lime juice. Okay, and so because again, lime juice differs. And if I've got a bitter one today, or somehow there's just like that little bit of edge, I'm going to round it out and I'm going to fix it with, strangely, unseasoned Japanese rice vinegar. I just named off 3 things for you. Unseasoned Japanese rice vinegar. Unseasoned, so not the stuff that's like got salt in it that they say, oh, you can like boost your sushi rice prowess if you use this stuff. Why like use something that is already seasoned? Because you cannot control the flavor of it. Use unseasoned. Use Japanese rice vinegar because it just has a beautiful flavor compared to other rice vinegars. And then rice vinegar instead of distilled or champagne, whatever else, because it really like has this round tartness. So I'm going to give this a taste. Let's see. I'm going to add a little bit of this. A little bit more water because I was talking and so my lime juice got out of hand. And some people also just like tart. And so I'm going to just keep tasting this until I get that limeade that I like. Some people can also use honey. Okay, that's good. And if you are a vegetarian, in the book, Vietnamese Food Any Day has a vegetarian option too, where you're going to use brown sugar, lime juice, water, sea salt, and a hint of soy sauce. You can't swap out soy sauce with fish sauce because soy sauce is dark, and you'll end up with a very dark sauce that will not say, "I'm Nuc Jum, but I'm vegetarian." It'll just say, "I'm a dark, diluted soy sauce." And part of making foods like this is to say that it is it is visually replicating something for you. And then after you're satisfied with your limeade, you're going to add the fish sauce. And the amount of fish sauce that you use depends on the brand and your taste and what's going on that day. So for example, this is a very common and popular fish sauce brand, Three Crabs. It's saltier than other brands. So if you're using one that is a little less in sodium, so this is coming in at like 1540. If you've got a brand that's coming in at like 13 or something milligrams of sodium, then you may need a little bit less. There was a time when this stuff came in at 1800 milligrams of sodium. So this just kind of, they just formulated it, and they're always reformulating the fish sauce. So it's not, you're not going to know that because it's not you, is what I'm saying. It is the fish sauce. And you're looking for a color that is almost like an amberish color, like an amber honey color. Dee Dee, is this the brand that you guys like using?
It's the one we use here.
Yeah.
What's there's another one that, another brand that I also use at home.
Yeah, a lot of people like Red Boat.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, and so this has a little bit of sugar in it. So they've got anchovy extract, which is a fish sauce, salt water, fructose, there's your sweet hint, and hydrolyzed vegetable protein. So the flavors of umami are inherently salty sweet. And so the fructose in there is going to give you that sweet savory hit so that you can understand how the flavors come together. That's really good. Haha, but I've been making this for decades. But you can always, sometimes I'm off too on certain days, and that just happens. But you just have to practice, and you're looking for a particular finish. And if you like this a lot, then what you can do is you can make a base of vinegar and water and sugar, keep that in your fridge, and then when you're about to make fish sauce, you just add your lime juice and your nuc mam, your fish sauce. And then you're ready to go. And that base can sit in the fridge for months until you're ready to use it. So check that for that in the recipe itself. Are any of you vegetarians in here? Oh, all right. No, it's okay. So now you know that there is a vegetarian option for the dipping sauce. And I'm wondering if we have time to make the tofu before we go into the chicken? Yes? Okay, awesome. So not just for vegetarians, I came up with this recipe for omnivores, because that's what I am. And it's a sriracha tofu. So tofu comes in many guises. And this, most of the time when you're dealing with tofu, you're dealing with a block that is sold in a tub of water. And so this is like an extra firm block of tofu. And sometimes, too, tofu is sold as a block in a vacuum sealed package. So the stuff that's in a vacuum sealed package is super firm. And super firm tofu is like as hard as if you make a fist and you go like this and you press on it. It's like, it's not going anywhere. I can throw it. It's like a brick. But there are good things about that. You can grate that tofu. You can also use it to make this little sriracha tofu. And if you don't have access to that kind of tofu, you can use just a regular block of extra firm. So extra firm is where I'm not clenching my fists as hard and I can press down a little bit more. And then firm, relax a little bit more. And then medium soft. And then you've got silky. So when you're buying tofu, buy it where you know that there is a high turnover. And when just like what you were watching me do there, so I hold my hand against here to just control where my knife blade goes. And this is a motion that I've done over decades and I've seen other people do too. And it just allows you to kind of control the block a little bit more. So we're going to make a half batch because it's going to be done in a smaller pan. So I'm going to now just cut these slabs. I want 1/2-inch slabs. Please notice that I have not done anything to drain that tofu. I haven't pressed it or anything. We just let it sit there. And you can even just open up the tub, start cutting up the tofu, and guess what? It just starts like crying and leaching out its water because you're cutting the membranes of the block of tofu. Very seldom do Asian cooks take time to press tofu the way that a lot of recipes say. That is sort of like a strange Western myth. So we don't like take a block of tofu and like put weights on it and like go walking away. And I know this because I researched and wrote a book about Asian tofu. We don't have time to do that. We don't have space to do that. We just cut the tofu and then we start prepping it. And as soon as you cut tofu, it starts leaching its water. But even so, for this recipe, you don't even really need to worry about that. Because you put the ingredients in the pan. So we've got regular sriracha. This is the go-to brand, the Rooster brand. There are, when you go shopping for sriracha these days, hot sauces that are made in Vietnam, and they don't taste like this. They actually taste more like the stuff made in Vietnam that you would get there as a hot sauce. And it's not like one of the brands that I like is called Fix, and it's just like readily available at like health food stores. And then this is Bragg liquid aminos. So how many of you are familiar with Maggi? Okay. So Maggi is, or Maggi as we call it, the Vietnamese people call it, it is a soy sauce-like condiment that the French introduced. The Swiss invented it in 1880, and it's like the go-to condiment for making banh mi sandwiches. But it's also fabulous for making this dish because it combines beautifully with sriracha to give it kind of like this meaty flavor. So you're just going to combine that. And then I'm going to put my tofu in here. If you're using the super firm tofu, the one that I told you that you could like throw at somebody like a football, you have to add a little bit of water. But with this, because the tofu has liquid in it, you don't have to do that as much. And so you're just going to turn the tofu pieces. And then it's simply a matter of turning the heat on this Using a new stove is always extra adventurous for me. So if something happens, please be patient. And so, because this is induction too, so you're not seeing the flames leap up as much. So all that I'm doing is I just coated the tofu in the seasonings. So when I'm doing this, the beauty of it is that you have a lot more surface area of your ingredient being exposed to the seasonings. So the seasonings will coat the tofu and imbue it with more flavor, and the tofu would suck it up. If I were to cook just the entire block in the seasonings, I wouldn't get the flavors to go inside the tofu as much, just because it's just like superficial on the superficial level. But this, we're just going to let it sit there and do its thing. And then once that the seasonings have coated the tofu nicely, I'll add a little oil to the pan, and then I'll fry it up so that it gets like this little crust on the outside. And so while all of that is happening, so you got your pickle going on, let's say you made your pickle a while ago, and then you're like, I want to make a really great noodle salad bowl. And so you can drag that pickle out, and then you can, add it to a bowl, basically a noodle salad bowl, to create this really easy Vietnamese dish. So how many of you have gone to Vietnamese restaurants and ordered the bún bowls? Come on, more than that. Yeah, it's oftentimes labeled rice vermicelli, right? So the noodles that we use are these dried rice noodles right here. And they are actually not vermicelli. They're really more like a capellini. And their size actually goes from, sometimes they can have like very, very fine vermicelli, capellini, and then it can graduate to spaghetti size. So there are different gradations depending, and what you use depends on the dish. So for this dish, the bún rice noodle bowl, and bún is B-U-N, it looks like bun, but there's a little accent mark over the U. So actually, if you're looking at this way, like it's going that direction. So that means you're going to say boon, so it's B-O-O-N. So can you say that for me, boon? Right, so next time you go to the restaurant, say, I would like a bowl of bún, please. And they will go, well, how'd you learn that? But anyway, it's called bún, and bún can be used, the noodles can be used in rice paper rolls. The noodles can be used in noodle soups. They can also be used to make little like rice paper, lettuce wraps, and then we can also just throw it into a bowl and make a salad with it. And that particular style, which is, we're going to make the cover recipe of the book, that's a Southern Vietnamese style. So you'll see these bún bowls done Southern style and Northern style. And the Northerners are like, we're not going to throw everything just unceremoniously into a whole bowl and let people kind of like scarf at it like this. We're going to make smaller bowls with like grilled pork, and the bowls are made in like small like rice bowl size, and we will we'll sit there and have conversation and make like bowl after bowl until all the ingredients are spent. But the Southerners, like, we don't have time for that. We like them big, like, because Southern Vietnamese people, we're talking about Saigon versus Hanoi, like to live large, and they just like to have a lot of things in the bowl, and it's colorful, and it's exciting, and it's also very convenient. So those are like just right there, you're getting a sense of the regional differences in Vietnamese cooking and Vietnamese culture. So as the tofu has gotten a little kind of crusty there, I just flip it. Use a nonstick skillet for this, and not like, don't go cast iron on me, because unless your cast iron is like super well seasoned, because it will stick. So already you're seeing the sriracha pick up some coloring there. So these noodles, I do not read the noodle cooking instructions. There are a lot of recipes that say, please cook the pasta according to the instructions. I don't do that. I go rogue, and I always am just like boiling the noodles to whenever that they're ready. And sometimes the instructions tell you to soak them. No bueno. If you just soak these noodles, they will end up tasting like fiber optics. They will not taste like any, because they never soften enough. The starches don't soften enough to pick up the flavors of the sauce and the other ingredients. No one tells you that. And the soaking is good for the very, very tiny size, like truly hair-like, vermicelli-sized noodles, and then maybe you'll throw them in a stir fry or something. But for Vietnamese food, man, we are not soakers, we are boilers, okay? So just please remember that and go rogue for me, because that's what I do. So once that we get to this spot in the tofu where things are looking dry, I'm going to add a little oil. We're half batching it today, so that's why you see me not use everything that's been measured. And so let's let that guy go. These noodles can be boiled like up to 3 days ahead, and then when you're ready to use them, microwave them. Don't put them back into the water because they will break. Rice breaks in water. So I've seen people go, oh, I don't want to microwave. I just want to because I think the microwave is evil. And I keep mine in the garage. Okay, just want you to know, I don't use it very often. But for certain times when I'm really trying to just, prep ahead, those noodles just get zapped very lightly after you sprinkle a little water on them for moisture. And if you don't want to do that, then you can put them in a bowl and pour hot water over them and then let them kind of just rehydrate that way very slowly. But no pot of boiling water business, because they will break and then they end up looking very sad and just like little sticks. So with this tofu, just kind of, let us do its number. And so we're getting that crustiness there. This is a tofu that I make and keep in the fridge. And then I can use this for rice noodle bowls. I can use this for banh mi. I can slice it up for rice noodle, for rice paper rolls as well. I can just throw some into my husband's lunch when I'm feeling kind of lazy. And it's just a very, very convenient thing to keep on hand. And it is really great. And you see, what happens is, if the tofu had been sitting in that, on the plate here, in the shallow bowl here for a while, so it had released some water. If you just cut that tofu from the tub, took it out of the tub, cut it up, there would have been more liquid released in this pan here. All right, so that'll be done in a little bit. Then once it's done, then we're just going to put it onto a rack and let it cool. I like to put it on a rack to let it cool because then you are allowing the flavors to really stick to the tofu, and the tofu isn't just sitting there and frankly sweating. And a lot of cooking is about controlling hydration, heat, and then seasoning. So when you're done with the tofu, put it on a rack and let it cool. And that is really dealing with the seasonings and taking all of those things into consideration. So because I am doing multiple things with you, I'm just going to turn the heat off and I'm going to let it sit there, and it's going to finish. And once the sizzling's done, I would then pull it and put it on the rack. That is called cooking on residual heat. Maybe a little lazy cooking, but as well. But those are those little kinds of things that I do in my kitchen when I'm just trying to do multiple things at a time. All right, so you got the noodles, they've been boiled in advance, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make the marinade for the chicken. Yeah. This marinade that you'll see in the rice noodle salad bowl recipe can be used with 3 different kinds of proteins: chicken thigh, boneless pork shoulder, or a steak. I've created it so that I know a lot of people like to have options, right? So I don't expect, if sometimes you don't feel like eating chicken, you want go pork. And And you can certainly do that, and it's great with beef too. So this is what we're looking at. So this kind of crustiness, that's what you're going for, because that's all of like the sriracha heat and the like rag umami savoriness, like just kind of like getting right in there on the tofu. Thank you. Sometimes I'll make like 2 batches of this and I just let it sit in the fridge and we eat it during the rest of the week. Just going to land this right here. Yes, thank you very much. All right, so this is a really great marinade because you can make it all in a food processor. And if you don't have a food processor, then you can go ahead and just pound away at it with a mortar and pestle. And so we've got shallot. Shallot is the onion in Vietnam. And we just need about half a cup. And you don't need like super duper knife skills. You just need to kind of chop it into largest pieces. And the machine will do the rest. If you don't have a shallot, then you can by all means use a regular yellow onion. In Vietnam, the shallots are really small too. They're like the size of boiling onions. Oh my goodness. Peeling those, not my kind of work. So we, here in America, where everything is bigger, we have like the luxury of like, you know, having big ones like that. And then some peeled garlic. I peel a bunch of garlic, like 1 or 2 heads at a time, keep them in my fridge, and then use them. I don't like, you know, I'm not really good with like pre-peeled garlic because you have to buy so many of them. And sometimes they turn kind of slimy and gross. So I would rather just peel my own. So when I do that, I just peel a bunch of, I take the heads, I trim the root ends off, I then separate the cloves, and then I soak them in warm water for about 15 minutes to loosen the papery skins, and then I peel them, and then they're ready to go into a little container, and use one that has a really tight-fitting lid. Otherwise, you're kind of garlicky for the rest of the week whenever you open up the fridge door. Just something that my husband reminds me of. All right, so the rest of it is just a matter of putting things into a food processor. And so we've got the shallot and the garlic. We've got a little black pepper, Chinese 5-spice. So a lot of people assume that Vietnamese cuisine is heavily influenced by the French. The French were there for a total of, you know, like they governed us for about 75 years. But our neighbors are the Chinese. And the Chinese had considered Vietnam a colonial protectorate on and off for 1,000 years. There's a lot of activity and exchange of ideas over the years, is what I'm saying. So do not forget the Chinese influence and also the South Asian influence through trade that happened too. So that's why you'll see like curry powder used in Vietnamese cooking as well. So today we're going to use about half a teaspoon of this stuff of Chinese 5-spice. And when you're buying Chinese 5-spice powder, choose one that, you know, has a lot of like fennel and star anise. Do not go for like that kind of stuff that you would use at you know, the holiday season. So we've got sugar, then fish sauce, soy sauce, molasses. The molasses imparts a nice color and oil. And then the oil enriches. Now we are simply going to do, right? And then we turn this thing on and we'll see how well this works. You know, the problem with these machines is that, thank you.
Safety
I know, I'm not like a safety person. There. And when you're at home, you can use a small mini food processor, because who else but at Google, unless you bring it into work, and like have it done here and like take it home in a jar. The other thing too is you can always make marinades 3 days in advance. No one tells you that, but you can. And then use it when you're ready. So you want like a rough texture, a little bit finer than this, but this is what you're looking at. And then empty it out onto your bowl. So, and then we've got our chicken. And you're going to have chicken thighs today. I just want you to see something very, very quickly when I'm talking about skewering. Because once that you have this stuff skewered, and also the other thing is if you've got a chicken thigh that is kind of thick, you can cut these gashes that allow you to make the chicken thigh a lot bigger. And if you're not into the fat, then by all means trim it off. But fat is flavor and fat is pleasure. So do not use, skimp on it, because there wasn't that much fat otherwise. So toss your protein in the marinade. And then when you go to skewer, I just want you to see in the instructions when I tell you to skewer the pieces on, that you are going to cover the skewer and keep the meat really tight. And it looks weird, I know, because everyone thinks that the meat has to undulate like that and look pretty like in a photo. No. Do this and then give it a little squeeze so that you have a column of meat. That way it remains succulent and you can grill it really easily. And then it can sit there for a while and then you can grill it off, and then we'll assemble the bowls. So we'll be assembling the bowls over here for you guys. And we've only got 5 minutes left. So I wanted to ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, so what is your must-have ingredient to cook Vietnamese food?
My must-have ingredients for cooking Vietnamese food. Rice and a bottle of fish sauce. Really, if I were to boil it down to two things that are really, embody and are crucial for making Vietnamese food, those are the two things. Is if you have those two items, you can manipulate so many other ingredients. If I were on an island, that's what I would get stuck with. Because then I would be foraging for everything else, and I know that I could still make Vietnamese flavors. Yes?
Do you still boil the noodles even if you're going to use it in a hot dish?
Yes, most definitely. So this thing about soaking noodles, it's just hogwash. Because in a hot dish, you mean like in a noodle soup or something like that?
Soup or, yeah.
Yeah, so for a noodle soup, the reason why you would boil them still is that there are starches left on the noodles. So if you throw them into broth, the noodles will release their starch and they would cloud up the broth. So if I soak them ahead of time, like in my pho recipes, in the pho cookbook, I soak the noodles and then I dunk them in hot water and then I throw them into the bowl and then I dress them. For these noodles, I would boil them first, and then if they're still warm, that's great. Otherwise, I would nuke them briefly, and then I would go ahead and cook them off. But just so that while you're still here, so when you guys are over there assembling, you're going to put down, you're essentially going to make a salad of lettuce and then some herbs. So mint and cilantro are all you need. And then you want something that's kind of crunchy. Cucumber, and then some noodle. These noodles naturally stick. That is their nature. If you're doing like a buffet for brunch, portion the noodles out to little nests that look kind of like this on a platter so that your friends can grab them easily. So once that you've got that down, then we've got the chicken. And all of this, I'm going to use this surface right here because this is a clean area of my cutting board, okay? And this is cooked protein. You can use that marinade on whole thighs, and you don't have to skewer them if you don't want to for like a large crowd. And then add your chicken to the top, and then you can finish it with some peanuts, and if you're allergic to peanuts, use cashews. Beautiful. And if you have fried shallots around, add some shallots. And then to finish everything off, you would have your nước chấm dipping sauce, and you can put some of also that little pickle that we made earlier. We'll do this. Gives it some really beautiful color. And then we'll finish it with the sauce. And if you want chili in here, that's awesome. If your guests are not into chili heat, leave the chilies on the side. And if you don't have fresh chili, then use chili garlic sauce, the Rooster brand. That's actually, it says Tương ớt tỏi Việt Nam, which is chili garlic sauce Vietnam. And that's really formulated for the Vietnamese palate, whereas sambal olek is really for like Malaysian, Indonesian flavor. But you can use them interchangeably, it's okay. Fresh chilies are great. If you've got Thai basil or regular basil, that's awesome too. But this is what you'll be creating over on the side there. And so that is how we march through all of these things. And if you're using tofu, goodness gracious. All right, so if you got the tofu going on, what I would do is I would slice the tofu like so. And what happens is this allows the tofu to sit really beautifully like the chicken would in your bowl. If you just slap a slab of that tofu on there, how are you going to attack it with your chopsticks? It's just not going to be as beautiful, and it won't commingle as well with the other ingredients. So this is like the finished product of our efforts.
Nice job. Who's hungry? Everybody hungry? Huge round of applause. Thank you, Chef Andrea.
Thanks
for coming. Thanks for playing.